and welcome to episode 9 of the Select Characters podcast. My name is Chris. I'll be one of the 3 hosts you're going to hear in this show, and I'm joined, as always, by Enrique. Hi, Enrique.
How's it going?
Yes. Sam could not make it because Sam is on his way somewhere in America, I don't know where, to celebrate his Father's Day, his very first Father's Day, because he has a new kid. So, this will be a good time to introduce a 4th member to our show, which today is our 3rd member, and that is Ryan Dildine. Hello.
Hello.
So, you're going to be working with us the coming time, and could you tell a little bit more about yourself and what you're going to do with Select Characters?
Okay. Yeah, like you said, my name's Ryan. I am almost 23 in about a month. I am a video editor, so for Select Characters, I'm going to be doing YouTube type stuff. So I'm going to be running the YouTube channel and making different video content for YouTube in terms of gaming.
Right, fair enough. Just so the audience can get to know you a little better, what are some of your favorite games?
I'd say my favorite games, the first ones come to my mind, Counter-Strike, Guild Wars, and I'll say League of Legends has a special place in my heart, even though I haven't played it in a while.
All right, so basically everything multiplayer related.
Yes.
All right, very cool. So yeah, we're going to get to know Ryan over the coming weeks, months, maybe years, who knows. But before we're going to do that, we're going to talk about what we've been playing this last week.
Yeah, so with SteamWhale underway, I actually finally managed to pick up Transistor, which I've been holding off for a while, and I'm glad I did. I kind of wish I'd picked it up sooner, because it is a beautiful game.
It is.
Yeah, it's weird. The combat system is a little unique, because it has like that real-time / turn-based system. Mm-hmm. But, it's got one of the favorite things that I loved about Bastion, which is the soundtrack. It's got a really, I guess, very interesting story that kind of sucks you in, and the art style is beautiful on it.
Yeah, I bought Transistor last night, and I played it for, half an hour. And how do you feel about the turn-based mixed system of combat?
It seems a little easy, I guess. It's not as challenging as I would have hoped. It's, like I said, when I first started off, it seemed a little complicated because I wasn't used to the idea of being able to pause it and then doing an instant multiple attack on all the enemies. I like the style. I really like that third-person isometric view, but I'm getting the feeling that combat's not going to be very challenging just because of, like I said, how it plays out. Because you essentially pause it, you can line up your attack, and then as soon as you hit go, you hit all the enemies at once without really getting hit yourself. So it doesn't seem like it's going to have too much of a difficulty curve.
Yeah, I didn't get too in-depth with it, but I kind of felt like there were times where it would pause, and I would do some stuff, and then all the enemies would explode.
Yeah, exactly. I did notice, I guess, some of the enemies do have a respawn timer, so if you don't necessarily pick up the item they drop by a certain amount of time, they'll come back. And I do notice some of them are a lot quicker than you in terms of chasing you, so it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult for you to run away and get that space to queue up your moves. But overall, it'll be interesting. I'm very drawn in with the music, the art style, and the story is intriguing. So, at least it's got that going for me.
And sometimes it seems like you're up against enemies that you can't really hit with close combat attacks, and you have to sort of position yourself in a way that you can hit them with a range attack, which I thought was quite interesting.
Right. It's definitely an interesting combat style, and it can be satisfying when you take out 7 or 8 enemies in one shot. But again, the fact that you can do that kind of makes me feel it's not really going to be as challenging as I would hope.
One thing about the downtime that you have in between movesets is that you can't really do anything except run away and hide from the enemies until your meter's filled up, which I thought was a bit... They could have done more with that.
I did notice that. I noticed that downtime is kind of awkward because they don't really give you an option or any ability to do anything. I think you get that little blink ability, but that's about it. So you're essentially just running around the stage until you can attack again, which,
Another point that I really loved was like you said, the music, the sort of trip-hoppy jazz thing. And there's a specific button you can press. So Red, the main character, starts to hum along to the music, which I absolutely loved. It's a useless little feature, but I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, I'm hoping the story and kind of the art direction. I love the art direction, but I'm really hoping the story takes off, because I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by the combat, but it wasn't. When I bought the game, I was expecting this intense puzzle game or this intense little action game, and it wasn't quite that.
Yeah, I agree, especially going off of Bastion, where Bastion arguably had a simple combat where it's just kind of a hack and slash, but it did offer a little bit more faster paced combat, more enemies on screen, and the weapon variety. So it at least kept you a little bit more interested than this is so far. But again, like I said, for me, the story seems they don't really give you much to start off with, but it gives you enough to kind of get you interested. So the story has me a little bit hooked, and the art style, music alone make me want to just sit there and play it.
Apparently, the story remains vague all the way through the game. I have not finished it yet, so I don't know if that's true, but I've been seeing people saying that.
But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I like about the Steam Summer Sales. You can actually pick up some titles that you might have overlooked for a while, so I'm happy.
I actually bought it twice, come to think of it. Got it on the PS4 and on the PC. Now, Ryan, what have you been playing this week?
I had a pretty busy week, so I didn't get to play much, but towards the end I was able to play a lot of Counter-Strike, which is my go-to game right now. I like structure, so I like kind of doing the same thing over and over again, but I'm a competitive person when it comes to actually being in competition, and I think Counter-Strike kind of provides that for me, and it's going good right now. I'm ranking up pretty good.
You say competitive. Do you pay attention to the actual competitive scene and all the pro matches and everything?
Counter-Strike, no. I used to play League of Legends, and I would follow the League of Legends scene pretty closely, and then I kind of made the switch from League of Legends to Counter-Strike, and I haven't had time to actually dive into the competitive Counter-Strike scene, but I'd like to soon.
Okay. I was just asking because one of my friends he's a really big spectator, and I was over at his place, and he was showing me some of the links he looks at to keep up with it. But there's a really big gambling community centered around the competitive league and Counter-Strike, which I was surprised by.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, It's because you know how you can unlock, I guess, the skins for the weapons and knives and things like that within the game? People use that as kind of an exchange for real currency.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, you'll bet on matches, and you'll bet items that you have, and those items that, you can actually cash out at independent third-party retailers. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I've got some friends who do that. I don't know much about it because, again, I haven't really dove into the competitive scene. But, I have some guys that I play with that they bet on games all the time, and they'll, be either super happy or super mad when they lose a skin that's worth $40 or $50.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I know that gambling on games is a thing, but I just never really thought about it. If you know what I mean,
it got to the point where I think a few months ago they had a little bit of a scandal because they found out that a couple of teams were actually rigging games.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think one of the methods was they would pretty much DDoS the opposing team, so they would be disqualified. And if you're disqualified because you can't play, obviously the other team proceeds, or they would have that happen to themselves, where there'd be a big pool for them, and they would intentionally throw the match or miss the match and get disqualified, and then get the proceeds from it's from throwing the match. It's really interesting.
Wow. So corruption is a thing in pretty much everything.
It's alive and well.
Wow. I've been playing some Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes because it was free on PS4, and I don't know. I guess the games are not meant for me, the Metal Gear Solid games, because I don't get why people are so into it. It must be the story, because mechanically I think it just didn't gel with me. I know it's a very well done game, but
Is it the stealth mechanics you're not a fan of, or just random general gameplay?
I don't like the way they handled stealth in this game specifically. I guess I'm not really sure what I don't like about it. It's just the mechanics don't really gel well with me, although I do feel I have to note that Ground Zeroes is a very, very good-looking game.
I think stealth can be a tricky thing. Some games, I think you feel like a super awesome spy or assassin, and then other games it becomes tedious just because you have to sneak around in the way they want you to sneak around.
I think it definitely depends on the atmosphere, because I know Aliens Isolation had that. I wouldn't say necessarily a stealth mechanic, but they did have that having to hide and not alert enemies, and I liked the way it was done. There was a certain degree of tension with it, even though it was very restricting. Mm-hmm. You had to sneak the way they wanted you to. You had to hide from the alien when you see it. There was set locations you could hide, but it kind of it played really well to the atmosphere, so I didn't really notice it that much. But I can definitely agree how there's certain games where if you don't do it to the T of how they want, it becomes really frustrating.
Yeah, I sort of like the mechanics you have in Hitman a bit more, which is more of a sandboxy type thing.
That's what it was. What was the most recent one? Was it Hitman? Was it Absolution?
I think it was Absolution, yeah.
The one that came out for 360, PS3?
Was it Absolution? Yeah, I think it was Absolution.
Maybe. I don't know. That one I was not a fan of because they actually changed the stealth mechanics in that, and where you were very limited. There was like high target areas where if you walk into them, you can get spotted instantly if you weren't out of sight. Yeah. The outfits you wore really didn't keep you hidden from sight either. If you walked too close to a guard, they noticed you immediately. So they really took a step back in how much freedom you had with stealth. So that was very frustrating.
It was less planning as well.
Yeah.
It was more about moving forward through levels instead of moving around inside the levels, planning everything to a T.
Yeah, it became almost like a checkpoint system where like the goal of the game was literally going from point A to point B without being seen with the enemies in between. And that kind of, for me, it broke what Hitman was supposed to be.
Yeah, it was a little more Splinter Cell than you were used to. And Splinter Cell is fine. I really like the Splinter Cell games, but the same mechanics apply to the Hitman franchise. Not a good idea. And I'm happy to know that they're going back to like the style of Blood Money in the next one. At least it looks like they're going back to that, which makes me kind of happy. What else? I've been playing the pub brawl thing you get in Hearthstone now.
Oh yeah, the new mode's out. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that is a lot of fun. Like 2 over-the-top decks with all new cards and stuff, and it's just fun. It has fun mechanics. You basically play 2 raid bosses against each other, like similarly overpowered abilities and stuff, and it's a lot of fun. I can see myself logging on once a week to play the new one.
Update me on what that is. I haven't played Hearthstone in a little bit.
It's basically you get 2 pre-made decks, and they're all themed around a certain thing. So an overpowered mechanic or like a story thing, for instance. And then you play with that for a week, and you can win a free card pack if you win, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a lot of fun. This week it's Sargeras versus Ragnaros. That's the one, versus Ragnaros. And you've got like themed cards and abilities that fit that persona and stuff. It's great. It's pretty cool.
Cool, yeah.
Plus, it's completely free of charge. So that is another option you can choose to play if you don't want to spend money on the game, which is cool.
One thing I was reading that kind of reflects the new mentality with it is that it's a really fun, laid-back mode that kind of gets rid of the need of balancing cards, because when you're playing it, since it's only for a week, these cards are supposed to be ridiculously overpowered, but the thing is, everybody has access to those same overpowered cards.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, you're throwing nuclear bombs at each other, and it's just a matter of like who can wear each other first or who can get most creative. So, I mean, it seems like a really fun way to break up the tension you see in like the more competitive, mainstream Hearthstone.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty much what I've been playing this week. Yeah, more of The Witcher 3. I'm nearly done with that one now. We've said enough on that particular subject in the past, so I won't go into that now. So yeah, if that was everything, shall we move on?
All right, so I want to ask you guys a question. As someone who plays a lot of FPS, what creates a satisfying FPS for you guys? Because I know you guys aren't as into the genre, I guess, as I am. I
gotta say, like, really tight gunplay is very important to me. Like, the guns should feel nice, should feel weighty. Shooting them should feel good, and it should look good as well. But mostly, tight controls are very important.
I like ease of entry. For me, it makes a big thing. Something just being able to just sit down, jump in the game, and start it without having to go through massive amount of learning tutorials or what button does what. Making the game just, really fun, click and point makes it a lot of fun for me. Because I'm more of a casual enjoyer of FPSs. I've played them a lot, with friends, LAN parties, playing a little bit of competitive and mainly single player FPSs. And like I said, for me, it's a lot about just making the transition, the experience as uncomplicated as possible.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Jump in and your only objective is to kill things, which is quite simple, straightforward, and usually it's quite fun. Do you mostly play it for stories as well?
It depends. I know like Far Cry 3 is probably one of my favorite FPSs. Same with Blood Dragon, because they're just really fun. And a lot of it was a story, just because it seemed like a really fun kind of action movie. So that was enjoyable for me. But they probably could have had an awful story, and I really wouldn't have cared. The mechanics were just so solid on those.
I'm kind of actually split on the story thing, because if I find a game is too like kind of convoluted in well, for example, I never really got into the Call of Duty franchise because I felt like I just got lost in menus of different weapons, of different attachments, and different perks and all this stuff. And those games I only played for the story, which I mean isn't stellar on its own, but it was fun enough for me to want to buy the game. And as soon as I got into multiplayer, it was like it was just too much. It was really overwhelming, the amount of stuff surrounding the FPS when I just wanted to play it.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem with multiplayer FPSs, isn't it? The progression thing.
Yeah.
It becomes way too complicated way too quickly. And it's just a chore to unlock all the stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really find that fun.
It depends. I mean, I know I'm probably going to be in the minority here, but like Halo 4, I really like their online progression system. We're just unlocking different armor and skins and colors and emblems, because it was more of a lighthearted kind of progression that didn't really have an impact on the actual gameplay itself. It was just more for personal enjoyment.
Yeah, that is preferable. Just unlocking cosmetic stuff, that's absolutely fine. I think when you're playing online, you want a level playing field. You want everybody to have an equal chance of winning, so you give everyone the same tools. And the way that Battlefield does it, or the way that Call of Duty does it, the more you progress, the stronger the guns are that you get. And you sort of get matched up against players who are not as strong as you, or you get matched up against players that are stronger than you. It just feels imbalanced, like you don't have a chance.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, I'm gonna keep saying good things about Counter-Strike because it's my favorite shooter. But that's one of my favorite things about Counter-Strike is when I hop into a game, it doesn't matter who I'm playing against. I know, like an AK is an AK is an AK.
Right.
Everybody's gonna have the same gun. I mean, you can have different skins, anything you want. But the playing field is totally level in regards of the tools you get to use in the game.
Yeah. It would be easy to solve if you were just getting matched up against people who are using the similar guns, or have a similar amount of wins and losses.
Well, it's interesting that you guys are mentioning that, because like a game like Call of Duty actually makes that difficulty progression a part of their experience. Because, with Call of Duty, as you gain levels, as you progress, you actually unlock better weapons, better emblems and things like that. But once you max out your level, you have the option to, prestige, which pretty much gets rid of all your progression up to that point, and you go back to level 1, and you just get that little marker that shows people, hey, I'm doing this willingly. And that difficulty progression where, hey, you know what, I'm going to do this over again. And you see guys that are like 8, 9, 10th prestige, which means, they've gone through that scaling system 10 times. And I guess for them, it gives them that sense of superiority where, hey, I'm willingly submitting myself to this difficulty curve. So it's kind of interesting that, that's something you criticize, but a game like Call of Duty makes that a staple within their franchise.
I didn't actually know about the prestige thing. I haven't played Call of Duty online in a very, very long time. So I didn't actually know about this. So take what I said before this with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I haven't played online since I think the first Modern Warfare.
I used to work at a GameStop, so I know a ton about Call of Duty, whether I want to or not. No, but I mean, it's kind of interesting, and something that I'm curious about is just how are those different, I guess, mechanics applied when someone's making an FPS with a multiplayer mentality versus someone that's making it with a single player. Because the Call of Duty games, Battlefield, they're all made primarily with the competitive multiplayer online element into it, and that's why you see a lot of progression, you see a lot of prestige, you see really quick pacing within the game. But then a single player game, Wolfenstein, the more recent one that came out, I mean, that was a paramount of a first-person shooter for me. It was like a throwback to the old school, just really fun, lighthearted story, solid, mechanics, great graphics, and I didn't see a lot of complexity in that system.
Games don't need to be complex in order to be fun.
Right, now it's just interesting, I guess, like in the focus when you're making that shooter, feel satisfying for just a person that's enjoying it as a single-player experience, versus somebody that's making it for, the more collective multiplayer experience.
What do you think about stuff like Borderlands then? They're sort of multiplayer, but they're fine to play on your own.
Well, see, that falls into like a co-op instance, which again, with Borderlands, I mean, it's a very story-heavy game. It's a dialogue-heavy game. A lot of the enjoyment from Borderlands comes from the writing. Mm-hmm. Just really slapstick humor. The funny boss names. Handsome Jack. Taunting you throughout the game series. So I think it's definitely connects more to a single player experience because it has the pacing, the story progression, even the leveling system. But even then, I don't think that really. It feels more like an ARPG like Diablo would. It has more of those similarities rather than like a traditional first person shooter.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Last night, actually, I played several competitive Counter-Strike matches in a row, and then I went with some friends and played Borderlands 2 for a little bit. And playing Borderlands 2, something in my head, I was like, this doesn't feel like the FPS I'm used to. I wanted to say FPS, but it doesn't feel like the FPS I'm used to, kind of that Twitch shooter where, your bullets are going to fly straight no matter what. And it's a really intense and competitive environment. I felt like Borderlands, it was something different.
Yeah, the bullets actually have different speeds, which I find interesting. Not the best idea ever, in my opinion, but it's certainly something different.
But I guess that's what I was trying to get to. Like, for me, Borderlands doesn't feel like a shooter, I guess. I play, Far Cry, it's a shooter. Crysis, it feels like a shooter. Wolfenstein feels like a shooter, but when I play Borderlands, it just feels like a more traditional RPG where, the enemies are just bullet sponges, or they just have a lot of health. You're just meant to play with friends. It doesn't really matter what you're using as a weapon. It's just presentation at that point.
Here's a question for you. Why does it feel so damn good to play an FPS?
I think there's a few factors that go into it. For example, for me, I'm not a competitive person, but when there's a competition, I can get into the competition.
Right.
And it's satisfying for me just to do well in that kind of game. To, outplay other people. It just makes me feel good. And, the opposite of that, when I do bad, I feel bad. But I think the satisfying thing is I can see myself get better at it. And I'm not saying that's exclusive to FPS, but I guess the progression of my own skills is one of the most satisfying things to me when I play those games.
Is the power fantasy a part of that? Because shooters are exceptionally good at making you feel cool.
Oh yeah, I think it is very much so, because shooting a gun in real life is a very visceral thing. It just stirs some power thing, deep inside you, and anybody that this might be kind of anecdotal, but anybody I've ever gone shooting with, they shoot a gun the first time and they turn around and they have this big smile on their face and they're like, wow, that was intense, And I think FPS, obviously, it's not the same kind of thing, but it's that mentality, that visceral mentality around, I think, guns and combat that makes it just feel good,
Yeah, I think
for me, I'm looking for more like a single player experience. And this might be weird. I feel like it's more immersive, but not in the sense that you feel like you're really there, but it eliminates a lot of the distractions. When you look at a third-person shooter, your character is always present, so there's a lot of things drawing you towards your character, but the movement, their actions, the way the character just physically looks, and when you remove that, it almost just lets you appreciate the rest of the game itself.
Right.
And it's weird, because I'm not speaking of immersion in the sense of, like, imagine wearing like Oculus VR, like you're really there. It's just, I can gain a better appreciation for what's presented to me. Again, Far Cry 3, like I said, it's been one of my favorite shooters in years, and I'm still remembering being able to, hide in the grass, look over, the bases, the water, jet skiing, and I can just have a bigger appreciation for what's presented to me on screen, because I don't have like a physical character that I'm looking over the shoulder of. So, at least for me, it makes it really satisfying, because when you're playing, again, it's just, you're reacting to a really lovely screen.
I have a question for you, Enrique. If you have the option in a game to play third person or first person, do you prefer one over the other? Do you switch?
Depending on the game, more than likely I prefer first person, because, again, like I said, I like that presentation.
Yeah.
There are some games, though, that the way, I guess, just because for technical reasons, first person seems like a hindrance. I know, like, case in point, DayZ was a game that was really frustrating in that manner, because I actually really enjoy playing DayZ in first person, the standalone. But because of how broken the game was and can be at certain times, with zombies, running through walls, or you getting caught on the floor, or clipping on an imaginary door that you don't see, that game almost felt like a necessity that you had to play in third person just to be aware of your surroundings.
Interesting, because DayZ was actually the game I had in mind, and
right,
yeah, I love DayZ, but I found myself hardly ever going into first person in DayZ.
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
I think it was a field of view issue.
Okay.
Because, you're in third person, you have this huge field of view, and then you go into first person, I feel like it was like putting blinders on, And it was, if I needed to go in first person, I could just right click and it would go down to my sights. But other than that, it was like I almost got like a panicky feeling if I went into first person and I couldn't tell what was going on around me.
And see, I got that same feeling, but that's why I liked it, and that's why I chose to go into first person. Because ideally, when I play DayZ, I like it because it's that survival simulator, and you're supposed to have that feeling of panic when you're walking into a town and you can't see 100% around you. So I mean, that's really interesting.
I usually like to play in third person if I can make a custom character. Like if I put all this time into designing a character that I find pleasing aesthetically, I would like to look at it as much as possible.
No, I was just saying, because going out, like, speaking of designing a character, it reminds me of a game like Skyrim, for example. Skyrim, I can't stand to play in third person.
Yeah.
I have to play that game in first person, but it sucks because, Skyrim is one of those games where I will very, very constantly stop my character and go into third person, just hover around, just to admire what my character looks like.
Yeah, I do that as well.
Just because, like, the way the armor looks, or you just want to see how badass, your design is.
Yeah.
But again, I think, and for me, it's just the mechanics of it. Your character looks so awkward when you're jumping, and like the running animation, and a lot of it's just it detracts from my overall experience when I see it.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just get that out of the way.
Strafing is pretty terrible in that game. Well, it looks terrible. Plus, the melee combat in first person in that game is,
it's not the best.
No, to put it mildly.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and like jumping feels like your character is just staying static and the world is moving up and down.
Right.
But I mean, like Chivalry, for example, I love playing that in first person. The melee combat in that is awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's a game that does that really, really well. Can I pull us back to talking about FPSs?
Yes.
Although this is more of a general question anyway. But do you think that people's love for shooters is because of a sort of a masculinity thing, like a very manly activity?
I think so. I'm not too keen on masculinity views on the rest of the world, but I know, in the US, somebody who plays Counter-Strike Global Offensive is going to be seen as more masculine as somebody who plays League of Legends, just by nature of the game.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I do think it's because shooters are mostly action all the time, and explosions and cool guns and stuff like that. And my inner little kid, like the small boy that I used to be, would be very happy to see that. So yeah, I think shooters scratch that particular itch. The need to see stuff get blown up, or the need to shoot stuff.
See, but I don't know how much of that is by design and how much of that is just us bringing our own personal biases into it.
Oh, it could be very well just a personal biases, and I actually think it is, yeah.
Because I do understand it's the Michael Bay phenomenon. You're looking at Bad Boys 2, it's the awesome guns, big explosions, one guy taking down, 60 or 70 enemies. It does create like that power fantasy, but I guess like that power fantasy can be translated into the whole concept of masculinity. Like that, this is what a badass Rambo archetype does.
Yeah, so more aggressive stuff usually gets attributed to
I think that masculinity factor is also very appealing on the surface, but it doesn't make for a good game. And I almost feel like it's a marketing tactic. Because I remember watching the ads for Call of Duty. It's like, it looks like a Michael Bay film, but myself and a lot of people included don't really like Call of Duty. I think it's they're appealing to your masculinity through these explosions and all these really cool things at the sacrifice of the actual gameplay. And I think that gets overstimulating when you're playing a game and there's explosions, grenades going off, bullets flying everywhere. It's too much, and it's way too overstimulating for you, where you kind of get lost in the combat, and there's no, I guess, real tactics to it. There's no real strategy. It's just shoot whatever I can see and lob grenades. So I think that's where the big downfall is because you lose the game in it, and it just becomes chaos for the sake of appealing to 18 to 25 males. Right.
By the way, what you just said about just lobbing grenades everywhere and just shooting your gun all over the place, that is my Battlefield 3 experience. Like, I don't know what's going on half of the time. It's just too... Yeah, you're right. It's just too much sometimes.
It just reminds me of playing... I can't remember the map name. I think it was Shipment on Modern Warfare, the original one. I remember the first time I logged into that map, and I don't know what I was doing. I got into like a 50 on 50 or whatever the max limit for that map was. And it was just absolute chaos. I had no idea what was going on, and I logged out of that map, never played that again, because I was like, this is dumb. Why would anyone ever enjoy this?
Yeah. I had that when I played Battlefield 3 for the first time. I was like, all right, so this is a thing.
I mean, do you think having that, I guess, that many people can kind of not necessarily relate the feeling of war, but make it closer to like that actual battlefield, that experience that a lot of people seem to be craving?
Well, it has to be, because war is chaos, and like large-scale games like Battlefield are chaos. So I think it's pretty, like, it's as real as you can get without actually going to a war.
I think it's chaos experienced in a different way. When you're playing, for example, Battlefield, you're experiencing chaos under the drive to get points.
Right.
So you want to avoid getting exploded because you want to win the round. But I would assume in war, you're trying to avoid getting exploded because you're going to get exploded if you don't. So I don't know. In terms of how close it actually is to war, I'd say, I mean, it's one of the closest ways we can get, but I would say it's nothing like it.
Oh no, there's no sense of real danger from the comfort of your own home, obviously. No.
Yeah.
But it's, visually, it's as close to war as you can get.
Oh yeah. I'd agree with that.
But yeah, of course, they're both still different things. One's a video game, and the other one is a god-awful act that happens on our planet. Yeah.
But either way, for some reason, it's still satisfying to grab the control and pull the trigger.
Yeah, it just scratches the need for violence, I guess. Plus, there is no consequence to you playing stuff like this. Nobody really gets hurt, and it's a fiercely competitive genre as well, which a lot of people like. I certainly like, the competitive aspect of it.
I think we find armed combat also just interesting. And that's why FPS, they're so popular, is because we find battle interesting. It's interesting to study in history, and it's interesting to play in games because most of us aren't going to experience that.
Mm-hmm. Thankfully.
And it's combat is just kind of an interesting phenomena.
Yeah.
And that would be, I mean, if I had to say my favorite thing about Call of Duty is I'm just interested in all the guns and the locations and just kind of how all that works rather than the actual mechanics of play.
FPSs, they're a thing that we like.
They are, very much.
Bam, bam, pew, pew.
I want to talk to you guys about the concept of having too much content. I thought that was something that wasn't really possible. Like, you could never have too much of something that you really enjoy, but I've sort of reached the point in The Witcher where I'm starting to think like maybe there's just too much to do. And I started to think about other games that had that as well. And I thought of Bethesda games specifically, stuff like Skyrim or Fallout, that have so many different things to do that I sort of feel lost. I don't know where to go or what to do. The Assassin's Creed games do that as well, with a map full of stupid little collectibles that sort of clog up the map. What do you guys think? Is there such a thing as too much content, and what can happen if you sort of come up to that wall?
Well, at the risk of sounding simple-minded, I get overwhelmed by content pretty easily. And if there's too much, it's like I said, it's overwhelming me, but it also feels more insignificant the more content there is. If there's only one storyline in a game, that's the most important thing, and I know that's the most important thing. But if there's a main storyline and 100 side quests I can do at any one time, it's like, why should I go help this guy? Because there's 100 other things I could be doing. And I guess I'm just bad at assigning that value to different quests, but the more there is to do, it feels more insignificant to me, as opposed to, a select number of things to do.
I can definitely feel that, and it's especially the way you brought up Skyrim and other Bethesda games. I know those games, that you have so many quests that they just become an annoyance after a while. But I think it also has to do with the quality of the content, because with Bethesda game, for example, the majority of those quests are just really simple fetch quests, like go to point A and deliver this, or go to point B, kill this person, and they're very simple and repetitive. So when you have a quest log that has about 70 variations of the same quest, that can definitely be a little exhausting.
I find it really hard to concentrate on the main quest when there's so many different things asking for my attention.
Right.
And I've come up to that point in The Witcher, like every side quest there is so well written. It's like a self-contained, interesting, well-written story, but it sort of takes away from the immediacy of the main quest as well. And because everything that surrounds the main quest is so interesting, you sort of get burnt out before you're actually done playing the main quest because you're so busy doing all the other things.
I know a big problem with at least The Witcher is the issue of overscaling, because I know that happens where you spend so much time doing the other quests that are broken up by level that when you get back into the main quest, you find yourself completely out leveling it, and that can definitely hurt the experience because you just breeze into the content.
Right.
But I don't know, it's funny because I'm thinking about Shadows of Mordor, and that game had tons of little side things you can do with between like the different, I guess, scenarios it had for the generals, where there was like the intimidation missions, there was like the alliance ones, there was like the collecting the sword pieces, the challenges. But with that game, I found myself playing that game hours on end, even with all that to do.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just the way the content is presented, though, because with Shadows of Mordor, I think the combat and that AI system, the Nemesis system, was so interesting that even just saying fuck it all to all that extra side quests, I had fun just spending hours tailing the orcs and mind controlling them and just jumping around.
Yeah, that Nemesis system is awesome.
I kind of feel the opposite of you, Chris, in that I don't get distracted by the side quests. In fact, the more side quests I have, the more it makes me want to do the main quest. Because I see these little side quests, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I mean, I could go... Like in Guild Wars 2 was a really good example. I found myself underleveled for everything because all the quests... Well, not all the quests, but one specific example I remember was, you could go save these villagers from a group of centaurs, and that was like the side quest, and get a little bit of experience, or I could follow the main storyline, which seemed significantly more important to me. And so that, I guess, that mentality going along the main quest, all the side quests, I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like that's not what I'm focused on. And the more the quests were there, the more focused on the main story I got.
What's the process behind that? Like, why is it that the more side quests you see, like, what makes you go from that seeing that huge list to all of a sudden applying more importance to the main quest?
Yeah, do you see like side quests and stuff as, being less rich in the stuff that you like about the game?
Yeah, I guess I feel like their only purpose is to level me up so I can continue on the main quest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I'd rather just follow the main quest and be a little bit underleveled than have to stop this story that I find more interesting in order to level up.
So you're an all killer, no filler kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that you're not really a completionist then.
No, in my head that idea is, it's really romantic and it's great, and I've tried it before, but I am not a completionist at all.
I am a completionist on the whole because I like to look in every nook and cranny and stuff, but sometimes it's just a bit too much. Take, for instance, Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, if you've played this, you know this. When you open the map, you sort of get a miniature heart attack as a completionist because there's 2 million different icons for little collectibles on that map. And I know that I don't have the patience to do all of them, but I want to do all of them because I want to clear the map. And so I get burnt out on the game.
I can definitely see that, especially when you have so much content that just, I guess, it kind of burns up your gaming shelf life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Because I know, especially with RPGs, there's a limit to how much you can progress, at least in terms of abilities and skills. And I feel by having so many different side quests for you to play around with those abilities and skills, after a while, you kind of become desensitized and fatigued to them. So you have no drive to finish the main story because like, I'm not going to get anything else out of this, so I'm kind of bored. And I think, thinking on that, I think that's why I enjoyed Shadows of Mordor so much, because a lot of the bigger game mechanics and skills you gain, you actually don't gain unless you do the story and you progress through. Because I remember the big one they showcased was being able to mind control the orcs. Right. That actually doesn't come into play until I think about the third act, where you actually get the ability to mind control them and then call them to your aid.
Yeah, that's right.
So it almost gives you like a motivation to continue through the story, and like those side quests just become a supplemental material where once you unlock that ability, you're like, I'm going to have a field day, and then you run off and do everything else.
Here's a related question for you, Enrique. What do you think is like the sweet spot in terms of game length?
Are you talking about like a quantitative hour amount, or?
Yeah, let's go with that.
I don't know, man. It depends on the game, honestly, because I don't think there's a sweet spot in terms of what you can present to me in terms of like how long a game should take to complete. Because I've played games that have been maybe 1 or 2 hours in length because they're just like small indie titles that I felt completely satisfied with. And vice versa. I've played games where I've never technically beaten because I keep restarting the experience because it's just so much more fun. Like XCOM is one of those. I played XCOM Enemy Unknown, Enemy Within. I think I've only actually beaten the games maybe twice. And half the other time was just restarting a game, installing the like long war mod, and just keep replaying over and over again.
And you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat. It really depends on the game for me. I mean, for example, the Walking Dead, the Telltale version, I would love if that game went on forever because I thought it was fantastic. But a game like, I mean, any type of RPG, that kind of thing, like a hack and slash RPG, it's like I don't want it to be more than, I don't know, 8 hours would be pushing it for me.
Right.
Oh man, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember when Final Fantasy 13 came out and I could not stand that game. And no, it's funny because one of my friends, he was all over it and he told me like, no, Enrique, you don't understand, man. Like about 30 hours in, when you get to the main city, like the game completely opens up and it changes. And my first thought was like, why the hell should it take me 30 hours to enjoy this game?
It just reminds me of like Endgame in different games, like mainly MMOs. It's like, why should I have to get all the way to the end game to start enjoying it?
Right.
It should be enjoyable the entire time.
Yeah, for me, the leveling experience is actually the most fun, to be honest.
Yeah.
This is a small side note from what we're actually talking about, obviously, but the leveling up stuff, that is what I find the most fun. I don't really like the end game because the end game feels like a giant gated waiting game. And I don't find that particularly fun.
I mean, to bring it back to the amount of content, I find that a lot of end games have too much content also for me.
Right.
Like, I really enjoyed the leveling process in Guild Wars 2, and then when I got to... I mean, that game doesn't have really a traditional end game like, say, World of Warcraft does, but when I got to my max level and kind of finished the story, it's like, well, I can start running dungeons over and over and wait for the content that comes every 2 weeks. Yeah. And it was the amount of dungeons there were, the amount of kind of builds and weapon combinations and all the content that went into that whole kind of grinding thing just turned me off completely.
Oh man, did you guys ever get a chance to try Rift?
Yeah, I tried the beta. I haven't played it after that.
Rift was the title that completely put me off because of like the bulk of the content. I remember looking at the skill tree itself when the game first came out. They pitched it like, there's no one built for this game, we're completely against cookie cutter builds. That's why you have so many abilities, so you can make these custom characters. And when I looked at it, I mean, it was like, I think 4 skill trees with like 20 something skills in each tree. And I looked at it, I'm like, I don't have time for this. And it was completely off putting.
I feel that way about, that's actually what turned me away from League of Legends was, they kept coming out with more and more complex characters where each skill has its own unique passive, and it's a gap closer and it has a knock up and it deals a percentage of the enemy's health while restoring a percentage of your health, and it speeds you up by 0.24. It got too much, and that I didn't want to keep having to, I guess, study the content of the game in order just to play it.
But isn't the whole meta game part of the pull for that particular game and that particular genre?
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what you're coming from, but what you don't like is a pretty essential part of the game experience for a lot of people.
I mean, in terms of the metagame, I would say I was more interested in the strategy of things, in actual, rotations and tactics and that kind of thing, rather than the individual skills and I guess the mathematics of it, because I'm terrible at math. But I think that's what ultimately turned me off to the game. And maybe that's something that the genre needs, and it's something that is just a part of that genre, and maybe it just wasn't for me.
Fair enough.
It's funny that you mentioned like League of Legends and that distaste for the meta, because a few weeks ago we were discussing Blizzard and how they have this really amazing talent to take these complicated mechanics on these other genres and strip them down to their most basic. So I think that mentality kind of explains why Hearthstone has been getting such a boost in popularity. Same with Heroes of the Storm. They take these previously existing game archetypes and they just cut out a lot of the content, and it makes it a little bit more palpable for people.
Yeah, they essentially remove content in order to make it a more streamlined and focused experience. And that is the thing. Sometimes less is actually more, because what I see with a lot of games that add a lot of padding, like a lot of additional content, it just seems busy work and it's not really fun. It just seems to be there to extend the lifetime of the actual game. That's not true for some games, though. Like, for instance, The Witcher, like every side quest is an actual really good story. But it happens in a lot of games. It's just padding. It's just meant to extend the lifetime artificially. I
know that that's always a little bit like discouraging when you see these games that boast like, oh, the game is 30 hours, so-and-so. Yeah. And then when you actually get to the meat and bones of the game, the campaign itself, you can probably beat in about 3 to 4, 5, 6 hours. And you realize that the bulk of that, that experience that they're boasting actually comes from this side content that sometimes it just ends up being really generic.
Yeah, just busy work.
Yeah, it's the collectibles, it's the side quests, it's just like needless farming on the side that eats up a lot of time and really serves no purpose to progress the narrative or anything.
I don't really mind that kind of stuff as long as it doesn't get in the way of what I want to do. So
right.
If I have to do, like you said, a bunch of busy work in order to play the part of the game I want to play, it's playing the game is getting in the way of playing the game at that point.
Right.
And that's a huge turnoff for me.
I wish it could be more like you in that respect. I know it's just, a personal flaw, if you want to call it that I want to do everything there is to do in that game. But it would be nice to just sort of shrug everything off and just focus on the things that I think are the most fun.
I think for me, what helps curate when, the too much content issue is, the pacing of it, when it's presented in such a way that it doesn't, you don't have it all at once where it becomes overwhelming the second you start the game. Mm-hmm. And I guess also just the way it's presented, at least in terms of, giving the player the option to completely disregard it and continue without being penalized. Like, The Witcher, it's a fun title and I'm loving it. But one thing that I did notice with it is that there seems to be a disparity on how the story quest scales in terms of level, where it's telling you that you have to go out and do these side quests because, like the story missions can go from, oh, this is for level 3, level 6, and it jumps to like level 10. And, if you're just sticking to the story, there's no way you're going to level that amount. And it's like this very subtle way of telling you, hey, you have got to go finish all these side quests that we gave you so you can continue to the story. And I think that can kind of cause a little bit of exhaustion.
Open world games do this an awful lot, don't they? At one point, the game opens up and poof, there's an enormous amount of content coming at you in one go.
I know DayZ is really guilty of that, at least for me, where it's a game that really has no set parameters on what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And unless I have a friend to play with and, we kind of set our own goals, a lot of times I find myself just standing in the middle of a field and I have this plethora of choice and I'm reduced to wanting to do nothing because of it.
Yeah, that's what happens to me when I play Bethesda games like Skyrim or Fallout. That's exactly what happens to me.
That's interesting. Because I kind of feel the opposite in terms of DayZ, which is funny considering the things I've previously said. But I think it's because I'm not forced into anything in that game.
Right.
That makes me want to do everything because it's like part of the joy. I'm a DayZ fan, despite the list of flaws it has. I like the game, and I think it's just exploring what's possible in the game.
Right.
Is enjoyable for me. So like where one game may say you need to go kill 10 deer with this gun, I'll go into DayZ and say, I wonder if I can kill that deer with this gun from like this distance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess I make my own little side quests, but they're more intriguing because it's something that's motivated by me rather than, oh, I need to be level 10 before I do this.
Emergent gameplay.
Yeah.
See, and it's weird though, because like I said, I do get into that mentality, but it's usually only occurs, at least for DayZ, when I have somebody else playing with me, when both of us log on and hey, I am on the north. I think I'm on the north side beach, and it kind of like we create our own gameplay through that. We find where we're at, we find supplies, and it's almost like a co-op experience. But when I'm playing single player, I almost find myself I don't know if it's overwhelmed, and I don't know if that's completely insular to just a DayZ experience or if it's the same with other games.
I agree with you that DayZ is infinitely more fun with more people, and I think when you have a group of people who decide on, your own little emergent side quest, it makes it much more, it makes you feel like you're a part of something more than just, I guess I'll do this, because I'm by myself.
Right. You should have a good balance between too much content and too little content, which sounds really vague because it actually is, because every game is different. But if you fill your game with busy work, a lot of the hours that you're going to put into it aren't exactly fun. You haven't maximized the amount of fun that you can get out of it, which is a shame, especially if you build a really well realized world that you just fill it with stupid stuff that doesn't really add anything to the gameplay, the narrative, or your immersion.
Yeah, I think when the game stops becoming a game and starts becoming a job is when we start having issues. E3 has come and gone. We also have some really cool titles coming up, but I started noticing a bit of a trend where, the site I write for, Gamersalt Weekly, they had, all their, news coverage for E3, what games were announced, what games are coming out when. And then I looked at sites like IGN, same thing, Polygon, GameSpot, and I started realizing that, a lot of it seems like a lot of the information is just regurgitated over and over again everywhere you look. And then I started thinking even more, taking a step back, and I was looking at the amount of trade shows that we see. We have E3, we have Tokyo Game Show, Game Developers Conference, we have PAX, Prime, Southeast, BlizzCon, MaxFest. Like Firaxis actually has their own convention that they just put together. There's the Video Game Awards. There's all these different trade shows for games. And while that's not bad in and of itself from a community standpoint, I feel that from a marketing standpoint, it almost feels like it's oversaturating the market. We're constantly seeing this information just thrown in our faces, and it can kind of get a little overwhelming, I think. What do you guys think on that?
The one thing I've learned about looking at marketing is that there's never a bad time to market something to the people.
All right.
Like, you want to remain relevant as long as possible and as often as possible. So that's why you give out every little thing that you do for your game. Every new build, you release a video to the public, you release a developer diary, you get a booth on a show like E3 or PAX Prime. You want to remain relevant because that is one of the ways that you remain in the public eye, and that in the end could very well translate to more sales because people know what you do, people know what to expect.
I don't pay too much attention to gaming marketing because, like you said, I just find it really redundant. And the games I do buy, I hear about through word of mouth. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that wouldn't happen though if they weren't marketing so fiercely.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like there's so many games coming out on such a regular basis. It kind of raises the question in my mind, what else do we expect them to do?
Right.
Like it'd be super hard to get a really successful game based on no marketing and just the merits of the game and word of mouth.
It does happen sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. But I think for the majority of games that just doesn't work.
Like, I kind of wondered what impact that has on the actual developers though. When it's almost like you're being presented nude to like the community. Every single build, there's a dev blog or a games press site covering what you're doing, and I don't know, I feel like almost from a developer standpoint that can become really stressful. It's almost this overexposure where you have no privacy to just sit down and work on your project.
That's definitely true. Plus, making the E3 gameplay demos and stuff, I've read somewhere that for some of the bigger games, it takes developers 6 months to make an E3 demo that is just made specifically to show at E3 and will most likely not feature anything that is present in the actual game. So it takes on a lot of extra stress for all the developers.
Well, it's interesting, especially when you look at, how much money gets spent into game marketing and production development. I know GTA 5 was reportedly one of the most expensive games in video game history. And I think the bulk of their budget actually went to promoting the game and marketing it.
$265 million.
Yeah.
Just think about how much money that is. $265 million. That is a ridiculous amount of money.
And I guess going back to the concept of trade shows, they're great from the community standpoint because, as gamers, you like to see this information. You like to get your hands on these early builds, and it kind of gives us something to kind of form around. You can go to these awesome conventions. You can get to see the earlier builds. You can sometimes talk to developers themselves, which is really awesome. But from a news standpoint, it almost seems like this information just becomes stagnant after a while. It's the same articles being printed out on the same sites, and I don't know if it's causing the gaming industry, the games press industry, to fall into this kind of pigeonhole where they can't do anything else because, for lack of content, because, if they don't report on what's going on, they're going to get outscooped by everybody else.
Yeah, in my mind, it kind of feels like a necessary evil. It would be fantastic if they could take that marketing budget and put it back into the game. But if they don't, they're just going to get lost in the slew of other titles that come out.
Well, apparently it is working, or else they'll probably not spend so much money on marketing in the first place.
Do you think we might be able, we could do with less trade shows?
Maybe. There's quite a lot of them. Like, you just named quite a few, and I know that is only a small percentage of how many shows there actually are.
Right.
I mean, it seems like there's a new trade show every other week.
Right, yeah, I mean, like last year, the Penny Arcade Expo, PAX, they had PAX Prime, PAX East, they just opened up the PAX South, and granted, I mean, I don't think they would be opening these extra trade shows if there wasn't a demand for them from the community, but at the same time, it kind of poses the question is whether or not, they're necessary, if maybe those resources could be going towards something else.
You could argue that they're not really necessary, but I think in the end, all promo is good promo in the eyes of a lot of developers and in the eyes of a lot of gamers as well. Plus, gamers are very involved with the industry. They want to know as much as possible, as soon as possible, and all these shows give them a chance to do just that, to get more information on the things that they love or are interested in.
Yeah, I think the shows, from a transparency perspective, I think that's what makes gamers feel like they are more part of a process of development.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you hear your favorite book is being made into a movie or whatever, it's like you just wait until it comes out. But when a game is in development and they're coming out at these trade shows constantly showing, whatever, even if it's minute, whatever new content has been added, you kind of feel like you're a part of that. Because it's basically the game developer saying, hey, we want to update you on what's going on. And I think it makes the consumer feel important.
But is it really transparency, though? Because I feel like it's less the developers and more the publishers at that point, where they're not really showing the current status of the game. They're just showing us a really pretty version of it. Yeah,
maybe transparency is maybe it's the illusion of transparency that people like.
Right.
That's probably closer to what it is.
Do you think that it maybe creates like this artificial feeling of involvement from the community?
Oh, yeah.
That, you're not necessarily present throughout every step of the way, but by them showing you these builds or, whatever, quote unquote, their finalized trailer for this particular expo is, it makes you feel like you're more invested in like the development of this and the history of it.
Yeah, I mean, you get attached to it, but in my opinion, unless you're actually actively testing the game, it's like you're not really doing anything other than spreading word,
The whole concept of early access is sort of hinged on that thing, isn't it? At least for us, like we can be a part of the development of a certain game. Early access is, in a way, promo for your game as well. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, more often than not, it's not very good promo, but it's promo nonetheless.
I guess it just blows my mind how these trade shows are handled, not necessarily because they have any desire to inform the consumer of the state of their products. It's just they're done to showcase, and get you to buy something. And it's really apparent with Shenmue, for example. It's a title that's 15 years old, and yet they announced Shenmue, and not only that, they announced a Kickstarter for it, which was funded almost immediately overnight. It crashed Kickstarter because it had so much traffic within the first 24 hours. And I mean, even up to this point, we don't know how much of the funding is. Sony did say they're going to back it, but they didn't really specify how much the distribution of funds was going to be. We don't know how much is coming from the community, how much is coming from Sony, how much is coming from somewhere else.
Well, you can bet that Sony is going to shell out a significantly larger sum of money than the people on Kickstarter could ever give the game.
You think?
Well, yeah. What does a game usually cost to make now? It's certainly above 50, 60 million, sometimes even above 100 million. How many people have donated? How much money have they donated to the game on Kickstarter now?
Is it like 2 million, 2.5 maybe?
Well, there you go.
I think 2 million was the goal, I think.
Yeah, but you know that is not enough to make the game with, especially not if you want to get it up to snuff with the standards that people have nowadays. 2 million is just not enough. It should be enough, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is based on a statement that I think Yu Suzuki, which is the actual developer behind it, came out and said that he expects the majority of the funding for the game to come from fan donations.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. Because if that were true, then he wouldn't have Sony finance him as well. I mean, it would be great if we could all, sort of adapt to a model where we just pay developers to make the games that we want. But in the end, games cost an enormous amount of money, and that includes marketing. Just having fans finance that, it's just not feasible, because people won't be able to shell out that amount of money. Well, they are certainly able to, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not solid on this opinion yet, but I think that I'm not okay with fans, like a game being developed only with fan money. Because it's the developer saying, hey, you guys pay for this game, you pay for me to develop this game, and then when it's released, you can pay for it again. And I feel like if you have a huge company backing you, it's their responsibility when the fans show interest. It's their responsibility to finance the game, and then we buy the game after. It just feels like, almost double dipping, I guess, into the consumer's pockets. I mean, of course, the donation, you don't have to give it.
Yeah, exactly. You're not buying the game. You are financing an idea.
But they're not telling you not to either. So,
Right.
Well, who would turn down free money?
Yeah.
I know it doesn't justify it, but I know for a lot of the Kickstarters, though, when you do donate the money or when you do, give a little bit of funding, they do have those milestones where if you donate a certain amount, you actually do get, the game itself. So it's not like you're paying for it and then having to pay for it again at released.
Still, though.
I know, I guess, I know we've kind of jumped around a bit, but I was just looking at the overabundance of trade shows that we have, and not that they don't do anything, but it just feels like a lot of the content that we see on them is kind of repetitive almost.
Yeah, very much.
Right.
And I understand it's about reaching a wide audience and a bigger market, and that's all well and good, but at the same time, I guess just for taking a step back and looking at it, it almost feels like this is less, milestone checking and the developers actually showing us the status of a game, and more the publishing company just taking it as an opportunity to just paint us a pretty picture over and over again.
It's like they're showing you this stuff just to be like, hey guys, remember it's coming, like keep us on your radar, as opposed to look at this cool new feature in the game.
Yeah, and
exactly.
it almost feels disingenuous, and this is especially true when I was talking to a few friends about the Video Game Awards, and how that's essentially just a holiday gift buyer's guide. From working at GameStop, the one thing you always see about a month after the Game Awards show is they send these stickers out saying, hey, winner of the 2013, Video Game Awards, or winner of this category. And it doesn't mean anything. It just becomes something else they can tag on to their sales line.
Yeah, it's the same thing with all those best of E3 kind of things. Like, all right, so you won an award for something that is not coming out for yet another year, and I should pre-order it now? It's weird. It's weird that it works, because they wouldn't be doing it if it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I guess I'm approaching this from the point of view of somebody who likes to read dev blogs. I like to read the patch notes, builds of a game, see what they're adding, what they're taking away, community feedback. I mean, I used to be part of the DayZ subreddit for a while, just reading all the updates and the experimental patch notes and everything like that. It was really interesting. And I just kind of wish that when I look at these trade shows, I'm expecting that same kind of, I guess, transparency and a little bit more candid approach from the developers, saying, "Hey guys, thanks for joining us. This is what we've been working on." But again, like I said, what you're seeing more is just this very marketing friendly, pretty picture painted of the game itself. And I don't know, I feel like that can almost be detrimental to the developers themselves too, because like Chris was saying, they're not actually devoting time to improving the game itself. They're working on a very specific version to show at these trade shows.
Yeah, very pretty vertical slice.
I mean, and how many titles have we seen that were presented at a trade show that we just never saw the light of day? I mean, Prey 2 comes to mind immediately. It looked gorgeous when we saw it like last year, I think. And out of nowhere, it just gets dropped.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, what happens to all those assets? And, were they just something they threw together to show us? And after that, they just get, locked in a vault and never seen again?
They usually get shelved, don't they? Like, projects never really die, I guess. They just get shelved, and people hardly ever look at it anymore. But it might get resurrected at some point.
Yeah, I know it's just a very vague topic. It was just an observation that I had in terms of the quantity of trade shows that we have and versus what we actually get out of them.
I think it makes consumers value gamer reviews more than we used to.
You think so?
How so?
Well, in my case, I find the amount of marketing kind of put out there for games is overwhelming. And I'm to the point now where I don't buy any games unless I hear an overwhelmingly positive response from the community.
Right.
So like in the case of Titanfall, I thought Titanfall looked awesome from the trade shows. Like, it looked fantastic. But then it came out, and a lot of people were not happy with it. And I was, in my head, I'm sitting there like, maybe I'll skip that title. And I did, just because based on what the community said rather than what I was marketed.
Yeah, I think that is your safest bet, because the public at large seems to be a little more unbiased than journalists are or people who do reviews on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can see why you would go that route. Yeah, but in terms of, is there an overabundance of trade shows and stuff? Yes, definitely. But people still go to them. People still like to go to them, and they are the talk of the town once they're happening, and for weeks after they're done. Look at E3. I mean, it's not really seen as a trade show, but more as a big media fun time circus that we all go to be amazed by all the stuff that we will want to buy in the coming year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose if you're a journalist, especially when you go to a trade show, I'm not a journalist, so I don't want to speak for one, but I would assume you go to a trade show expecting the same stuff you've heard over and over, but you don't want to be the guy who didn't go and miss something huge.
That's a really good point. And it's funny because from a journalist standpoint, I like to read more of the, I guess, personal stories you get, direct conversations with developers, talking about their processes or just experiences that they've had. But I do realize that that's a very important problem that people face, that, when you go to those trade shows, nobody wants to be the site that didn't, regurgitate what the Oculus Rift is going to be doing now, or the next big game coming out by Bethesda. Nobody wants to be that guy. So I feel like from a journalist standpoint, a lot of times they sacrifice more meaty, in-depth content for the sake of just very lighthearted, quick-to-put announcements.
Yeah.
So yeah, trade shows, they're not a bad thing. Like I said, from a community standpoint, it's great, but I think they're great not for the games that they offer, but more for the overall experience. You go because you want to be in that really hype-filled, high-energy, surrounded by gamer community. Makes
you wonder, at which point does it stop to add anything to the games or to our perception of that game? Because after seeing the same thing 20 times over, you sort of become desensitized to it, I guess. And that concludes episode 9 of the Select Characters podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as we enjoyed making it, and we hope that you like Ryan. We think he's going to be a wonderful addition to the team, and he's going to be setting up the YouTube channel soon. So keep an eye on the YouTube channel, links in the description. So, from all of us here at Select Characters, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week, and Sam will be back next week as well. Goodbye!
Later.